spoiling such a wonderful spirit of worship. You're all enjoying your singing. I don't know why you have to listen to my voice now, because at home even our dog starts barking when I sing. So I try not to sing too much when I'm on the road and save my voice for speaking. When David McNeut and the others had met me at Moody earlier on in the year and asked me to come and speak today, I was convinced it would be impossible, and then when I looked at my diary, I said, that's amazing, this weekend is free. I said, how did that happen? So I accepted it, and a month ago I found out why it was free. Tonight is my granddaughter's 3rd birthday party. And when I looked at that, I said, what have I done? I'm going to be in trouble. I'll be evicted from my family. I'll have to stay on in Chicago for a long time. My family is in Atlanta. So I looked at my wife. I said, how did this happen? And her actual birthday is on Monday, and my assistant had circled the Monday for the party, but I did not know that everybody had been invited tonight. So I talked to my daughter and asked her if it's okay, and she gave me her blessing. My wife gave me her blessing, so I spoke to the family today, and you pray that the home will still be open to me when I return tomorrow to celebrate her birthday on Monday night. But thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here, and what Vlad was saying about the memorable meetings in Cluj some time ago, it was an amazing evening to just hear that 1,000-voice choir that he talked about, and to see the hundreds of people coming to know the Lord. See, it was about in the 70s, that late 70s, that I went to Romania for the first time. I was in the city of Pitești. It was somewhere or just a little after I think Billy Graham had been there. And I heard a story told by Billy Graham. It was an amazing story that 2 of the pilots that had flown him into Romania were walking the streets of Bucharest on a cold winter's day. Everybody was bundled up and walking through the streets, and they saw a man walking by on the sidewalk whistling a tune, and it was a very rare hymn. The great physician now is here, the sympathizing Jesus. So the 2 pilots who were Christians couldn't believe that here in the streets of Romania they were seeing a Romanian man whistling a hymn. So they locked step with him, walked beside him, and whistled with him the same tune. And he stopped, looked at them, but since they couldn't speak each other's language, he pointed to the heavens, touched his heart, they embraced each other and said goodbye. I told that story some years ago after having heard it from Billy Graham, and there was a lady in the audience in New York when I spoke. She said, you're talking about my husband. He was that pilot walking through the streets of Bucharest and hearing this man whistling that beautiful hymn. So I said at that time, I've got to get to this country. I've got to be there, which God made it possible many times. And then recently with my colleague Vlad now setting up office there. So you all represent one of my favorite countries in the world, and I want to thank you for your witness, for your hospitality. And I hope before my life ends on this earth, I can get back there a few more times. You can't beat the hospitality there. I've been to, of course, to Pitești, to Bucharest, to Cluj, to Timișoara, and also to Sinaia. And I just look forward to getting back and eating some more of that wonderful pork that you serve there at every meal. You come back quite pork full by the time you're finished. You know, it was great to hear the choir singing Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho. The story is told of the Sunday school teacher who was checking out the religious knowledge of his children and how the instruction was being done at home. So she said, who pulled down the walls of Jericho? And she looked at the little boy, and Johnny, she said, what's your answer? He said, I promise you, teacher, I didn't do it. She was so shocked that he'd never heard this story, so the next day she went to visit the family. And she saw the mother there. She said, you know, I'm astounded. This famous story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho and the walls coming down. Yesterday, when I asked the class, who pulled down the walls of Jericho? Your son, Johnny, said, I promise you, teacher, I didn't do it. And the mother said, I want to tell you something about my Johnny. If he says he didn't do it, he really didn't do it. Now he was really astounded and decided to go and visit the father at the office. So he went to the office and said, you know what's happened? Your son says this, your wife said that. The father said, I've heard about you. What's the problem? How much did this wall cost anyway? We'll try and replace it. Biblical knowledge, so rare, so unknown in our time. We are a biblically illiterate people. So little of the scripture is expounded. And as I've been asked to speak to you on the maturing and the instructing of the church, I want to talk to you about that a little bit. But let me tell you a funny little story before that. This young man was being interviewed for ordination, and the bishop said to him, do you know the story of the Good Samaritan? And he said, yes, sir, I do. He said, tell me the story. So the man says, it's a story about this man who was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among the thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked him. And as he went on, he didn't have any money. And he met the Queen of Sheba, and she gave him 1,000 talents of gold and 100 changes of raiment. And he got into a chariot and drove furiously. And when he was driving under a big juniper tree, his hair got caught in the limb of that tree, and he hung there many days, and when the ravens brought him food to eat and water to drink, and he ate 5,000 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. One night when he was hanging there asleep, his wife Delilah came along and cut off his hair, and he dropped and fell on stony ground. But he got up and went on, and began to rain, and it rained 40 days and 40 nights, and he hid himself in a cave and lived on locusts and wild honey. Then he went on till he met a servant who said, come take supper at my house. And he made an excuse and said, no, I've married a wife and I can't go. The servant went out to the highways and the hedges and compelled him to come in. After supper he went on and came down to Jericho, and when he got there he looked up and saw that old Queen Jezebel sitting up on the high in the window. And she laughed at him, and he said, throw her down. Then they picked her up, and he said, throw her down again. And then they threw her down 70 times 7. And of the fragments that remained, they picked up 12 baskets full, besides women and children. They said, blessed are the peacemakers, P-I-E-C-E. Now, whose wife do you think she will be on that judgment day? You know what? The day will come where an audience in the church will not so sure understand how messed up that story is. He's put together scores of biblical narratives and messed up the story of the Good Samaritan. How do you and I mature? How do we grow? How does the church engage some of the brightest and keenest minds in our world today? My colleagues and I go to some of the finest universities in the world. Whether you're at Harvard or Princeton or Yale, whether you're at MIT, whether you're at the universities of India or the universities of Europe, the audiences are packed to capacity, and the young men and women are coming there because they have no answers to life's deepest questions. All the peripheral issues are addressed in our churches. Sometimes we don't get to the depth of what it is people really want to know. And the same has happened in the university. If the church doesn't rise up to the occasion and see this vacuum and see the emptiness and minister to the souls of people and understand the depths of their longing, we will make the same mistake that our universities have made. All of the disciplines, all of the subjects, and they've left the souls of their young men and women empty. In fact, a powerful book written by one of the professors at Yale recently says that secularism has failed this generation and they do not have any answers. So I say, has the church given the answers? Are we taking the opportunity to listen to the questions of our young? They are longing to put together the answers to life's deepest questions. There are 4 of them. The question of origin, the question of meaning, the question of morality, and the question of destiny. Origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. The scriptures is the only source that gives us the answers. Listen to me carefully now. Answers that are individually and correspondingly true. And when all of the answers are given, there is a coherence to those answers so that life can be put back together again, rather than leaving us a fragmented individual. The very English word individual means we are indivisible. We cannot be fragmented. We are looking for coherence and meaning. This is a moment for the church to rise up as a mature body of men and women and instruct in such a way so that the deepest questions are answered for humanity. There are no other answers anywhere else, believe me. I want to speak to you tonight from 2 Kings 21 and 22. It's the story of two kings, Manasseh and Josiah. And my message is entitled, Lessons from History, the Tale of Two Men. The famed poet Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote this poem. I'm sure you as a people can relate to it. It's a bit difficult to interpret and translate, but the general idea will be communicated to you. Shelley wrote this: I met a traveler from an antique land who said to vast and trunkless legs of stone, stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that the sculptor well those passions read, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, stamped on these lifeless things. And on the pedestal these words appear: my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Demagogues, dictators, whose statues lie in deserts half shattered, with broken countenances, and words written to exalt them, only to find out that through history they have come crashing down and stand in some lonely terrain somewhere with a frown and wrinkled lip and a sneer of cold command that the sculptor read, but the lone and level sands stretch far away to talk about the demagoguery that comes and goes. You as a nation have lived through that kind of struggle, with the demagogue having come and gone and inflicted the kind of pain that he did on millions of people for so many years. And yet there were men whistling hymns on the streets of Bucharest. And yet today you are here by the thousands. You see, Jesus Christ always rises up to outlive his pallbearers. Those who think they are carrying him to their grave, to his grave, find out he has triumphed over the grave and his word abides forever. So I want to thank you for your faith, for your commitment, and I want to focus my message particularly on this younger generation, because they will have to carry the torch. They will have to carry the light into the future. History is really a collection, said somebody, of innumerable biographies. History is a collection of innumerable biographies. When you and I live, we paint a self-portrait of our lives on the canvas of time. When you get to eternity and look through the keyhole of eternity, you will take a look at the whole gallery of paintings and the whole gallery of biographies. It's your turn and my turn. Let's take a look at these two kings and see what happened and the results of that. First is the king Manasseh. The Bible says he was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. His mother's name was Hephzibah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He also erected altars to Baal and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab king of Israel had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem, I will put my name. In both courts of the temple of the Lord, he built altars to all the starry host. He sacrificed his own son in the fire, as he practiced sorcery, divination, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, provoking him to anger. You see what he did? Longest reigning monarch, 55 years, but he provoked the Lord to anger and did evil in the eyes of the Lord, including offering his son to the burning arms of an idol, as screams would go out towards the heavens of mothers calling for help and calling for protection. He made 3 choices. You see, his father's name was Hezekiah. Hezekiah had brought in a reformation into that land, a revival in that land. When Manasseh came on the scene, he decided to turn his back upon the God that his father had worshipped, to turn his back upon the revival that had come in. And he clenched his fist towards the heavens and decided he was going to make decisions that would turn the whole nation away from following God. That was the first choice he made. There was a second choice he made. He turned them towards all kinds of idolatrous beliefs. Young people, listen to me. You cannot live for long under the illusion of neutrality. You will never be neutral. If you turn your back upon the living God, you will have to find some false gods and false altars and false places to worship. Nature abhors a vacuum. And when we turn our back upon the living God, we start following incredible philosophies and ideas. As G.K. Chesterton said,